Welcome to the Empowered Working Mom Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Jocelyn Young. Our mission here is to amplify the stories of all moms so that they can be seen, heard, and supported in their motherhood journey, regardless of whether they're balancing motherhood with an external career or choosing to dedicate themselves fully to motherhood. We believe here that everyone has a unique story, and we found that storytelling is an impactful way to connect and learn from one another. Because sharing and listening to each other's stories makes us feel connected, supported, and inspired. We're excited to bring you diverse stories from fellow working moms like you. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and listen in to today's story to feel acknowledged, encouraged, and most importantly, that you're not alone in your experience as a working mom. Hey there, amazing mamas. After taking a much needed breather during the last quarter of 2024, I am super excited to kick off season 5 of the Empowered Working Mom Revolution podcast. But first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting this podcast. And thank you for just sharing this podcast with fellow mamas out there to help them feel seen, heard, and connected and not alone in their journey of motherhood. Now, you know, I believe in keeping it real with you all here on the podcast. So let me share a bit about what's been happening behind the scenes. So these past few months have been quite the journey for myself. I've been pouring my heart into building Nurture Ed Solutions, which is my new company that's all about helping K through 12 schools build cultures of care that supports educators' mental health and well-being. And speaking of mental health, as someone who coaches others on well-being, I had to practice what I preach and give myself permission to slow down and recover from burnout. But it hasn't been all that serious stuff too. In addition to slowing down and recovering from burnout, I've also been having an absolute blast recording conversations with amazing guests for season 6, which you're going to love in season 6, which don't have a date yet of when that's going to launch, but I'm excited to share those stories with you for season 6. And speaking of amazing guests, today's conversation feels exactly what we all need right now. So I am excited to introduce you to Divya Ramachandran, a seasoned leadership coach who helps startup leaders find clarity to do hard things. And her journey from engineering to product leadership in Silicon Valley and now to leadership coaching is a powerful reminder that our paths aren't always linear. And that's exactly what makes it beautiful. So she uses her tech background and expertise in emotional intelligence and cognitive behavioral coaching to empower leaders to navigate challenges, improve communication, and drive team success. But you know what I love most about her story during our conversation? It's how she took all those experiences that she's had and transformed them into wisdom that speaks right to the heart of what each and every one of us are going through as moms. So grab your coffee or wine, no judgment here. Find that quiet corner where the kids can't find you for a few minutes, whether that's in the car or the bathroom or the closet, and settle in for a conversation that might just change how you think about this whole motherhood journey. So let's dive in. Welcome to the show, and I'm super excited to hear your story, Divya. So thanks for being with us today on the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Jocelyn.
You're so welcome. Well, let's dive right in because I'm just really curious about your story. And I want to start off with a significant moment in your life. Like, what is a pivotal moment in your life, whether it's personal or professional, that really has shaped who you are today and the lessons that you learned from that pivotal moment? And let's start from there.
Yes, awesome. Love this question. So I have a background in tech, and I worked in tech for several years. In fact, I got a PhD in human-centered computing, and I was like super tech my whole academic career. And at some point during my well, while I was in academia, I kind of realized how much I cared more about people than technology. And so I sort of moved to this place of understanding humans and their role in influencing how we design technology. And so that was my area of focus. And so all that to say, I was working kind of for several years in tech, and in my previous career, that's what I was doing. I was leading a team of product managers and product designers at a Silicon Valley startup. And I just remember this moment. It was, my kids were 2 and 4. So I have, they're now 9 and 11. So it's, a little while ago. And I had just gotten promoted to VP of product. I was leading this team. It felt like a career high. Like I felt really good about what I was doing. I was excited about the role. I was excited about, the promotion. And I was even like doing a side gig, teaching a graduate school course at Berkeley, where I went to grad school. It was, it just felt like this place where I was looking at my life and saying like, wow, you did it, you made it, and it's great. And I loved my career. And I bring that up because it was kind of one of the only times in my life where I had truly felt that way. And when I was riding that wave, I had this conversation with another mom. And she's just a good friend. And I was asking her how her work was going, because I was just really excited about people's careers at that moment. And I was asking her about how it was going. And her response was something like, yeah, work is fine, but work is work. And I know that my number one priority is my kids. And I just remember stopping and like just taking in what she had said and feeling like, why don't I feel this way? Like I really didn't. I felt like my career felt so great, and I was riding that wave, and I was feeling so good, and like, yes, I was around for my kids and all that, but I just, it wasn't the feeling that I was feeling, that like, hey, my kids are my number one priority. I just felt like I was thinking a lot about work. And I think that's when I started just thinking about how there's so many expectations around us, around what we're supposed to believe, like as a working mom, like what we're supposed to believe is important for us or not. And how in that moment, it didn't feel like that's how I was feeling. And that felt like there was something wrong with me, or I was broken in some way. And I kind of sat with that for a little while. And that moment really stands out to me, in contrast to a moment that happened about 18 months later, because at that point I had, the newness of being this head of this team had really worn off. The company was having a hard time. There was a lot of stress leading the team. Everything there was a lot of stress. I was bringing a lot of stress home.
Yeah.
Things were changing at the company. I worked at a startup, so lots happens quickly. And my older child was starting kindergarten. And so I realized as I was dropping him off, and in those moments, like those first few days when I was dropping him off at school, it was so clear to me that I wanted to be the one picking him up from school. I wanted to be the one like walking him home and hearing about his day and knowing about like the trouble he was having with his friends. He was only 5, but still, it suddenly felt like, oh, there's nothing more important to me than being there for my kid and being there to pick him up. And so it was just this complete shift that had happened. And I like to think about like that whole thing as a moment, because I think that we have these expectations of what we're supposed to, which one we're supposed to prioritize. And I just think it's ever changing. Like I'm on this path right now, and I found this particular balance that works for me right now. And I don't think it's the same as it's been, and I don't think it's the same as it's going to be. It's just what it is in this moment. And so that's just a moment that I think is really just it really kind of kicked off a whole career change. So I think that's kind of something that I reflect on a lot, is like, how did that change, and how did I end up, move from that place of not feeling it to feeling it completely. And this is something that I think is just something we're constantly struggling with, is, where do we put our priority? Where do we put our focus?
Yeah, the shifts, right? Yeah. The shifts, and allowing those shifts. I love how you brought that, like just shared that significant moment, because it really highlights like, I don't know, the word mom guilt comes up, because it really highlights like being okay that at one point when your kids were young, your whole, you were riding that wave. You were like on that high, career high, and it's like it was okay. And then eventually it shifted to no, and I want to pick up my kids, right? Like, and that's okay. And I love how you like pointed out, like, we get caught in this should, like, you should be in this place where you're always prioritizing your kids no matter what. And
Yeah.
it's not okay to prioritize your work or be happy with your work. And that doesn't have to be like that all the time. And this says nothing about you as a mom if you're like, I'm really loving my career, right? Like it's it's like,
Right. Right.
yeah.
And to be able to look back at that for myself, as well as, when I talk to other moms now and realize that, yeah, in this moment, okay, this is not for you. And it doesn't mean that you haven't had this amazing, prolific career up until now. Doesn't mean that you won't. But
Yeah.
maybe in this moment, what you want is to be with your kids and vice versa. Like moms who are just like, I just need a job and I need to be out there and I need to be doing something else. Like, yeah, it has everything to do with the context that you're in that moment and nothing really to do with who you are or your identity.
Oh, I love that. That's so powerful. I think that's really helpful to like just that what you said. It has nothing to do with your identity and who you are. It helps us as moms, right? Under navigate through all those complexity of the emotions that we feel, right? Because we're always thinking about what's the best decision, and it's like whatever decision you make is the best decision in the moment, and it says nothing about who you are and the identity that you hold.
Right.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Is there, I guess, is there something like a challenge maybe involved in that significant moment that you've had to overcome? And what was that like? How did you overcome
Yeah.
that? Because you just said you like it totally when you had that shift, you had a whole change in your career, right? The
Yeah.
trajectory of your career changes. But I
Yeah.
don't know if that's related to, a big challenge that you experienced that you had to navigate through.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was like the introduction to this big challenge of, and maybe an ongoing challenge, which is almost an enjoyable one of just discovering who I was and what matters to me.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't know if you can relate. I'm sure you can relate to this actually, but it's just like this idea that as I was a working mom with young children, I was almost always the first person to leave the office, and still, even so, one of the last people to pick up my kid from school.
Mhm.
Right? It's just like constantly, like both would always happen, and so work and life were kind of work and family, I should say, were competing for my time.
Mhm.
But I think that was not just competing for my time. It was also, like I was saying, kind of competing for my identity, right? It's like, which one am I? And I would, show up at work, um, show up at work and look around and just be like, wow, you guys have no idea what I've been through the last hours to even just like show up here, like all the stuff that has just gone wrong this morning and the stuff I've had to do. And then like come home and just be like, wow, you guys just really have no idea like what I've just done at work. Like,
Yeah.
I killed it today, or I'm so stressed today, and like you have no idea. And it's just like you're constantly juggling these two selves.
Yeah.
And so I think the big challenge for me I had these couple of months of really struggling while I was still working, but wanting to leave and knowing I wanted to leave, but not knowing quite that yet. Just knowing, I think the feeling I had was my work's not adding value to my life. And I think it's actually detracting value from my life. Like I feel like I'm terrorizing my kids at home because of all my stress. I'm just like constantly bringing it out on them in some way. And they were little. I feel like I can't rest. It was all this stuff. So just carrying that stress. But at some point that clarity came that like, if this is not the life I want to be leading, and in fact, it's taking away from the life I want to be leading, then it's time for me to leave. But there was a period of, I guess it was just this roller coaster after I did decide to leave. I decided to leave without knowing what was next. And I was just following a feeling. And I'm so grateful that I had my husband to lean on, and he was very supportive of me taking some time. And so it was kind of this like privilege, but also a challenge of trying to figure out what's next. And I think the feeling I was seeking was just this desire to be whole, to feel integrated in life and work and everything else, just like be the same person everywhere. And yeah, that's actually what eventually led me to signing up for my coach training program, and then deciding to take on that path.
Wow. So you literally were finding who you are again.
It's funny you say it again, and I was like, did I know before that?
Yeah, it's like
no. But also, it felt like the first time it was me trying to define who I was. I think up until then it had been community and people around me and culture and expectations that had defined who I was. And this was the place where this was the time when I was like, okay, I want to know who I am.
Oh, that's so powerful what you just said, because I think that that's such awareness for all of us moms of like, there is an opportunity to create space for us for us to find ourselves, find out who we are. We get to define our own identity, and not from cultural, familial, whatever, work thing or family even.
Yeah.
Like, that was just a powerful statement that you just said, because for me, I was like, whoa, like when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, it was like a big aha moment for me too, of like, yeah, we have, like, it's honoring all the ways that other external factors have tried to give us the identity, that you have the agency to define your own identity, and you created that space. You like took that leap to like, I don't know what else, but what I do know is this is going to I get to define my own identity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
That's
love the way you said that as well. I just that idea of honoring, like,
yeah.
yes, you've come from somewhere, and you don't need
Yeah.
to. Sometimes we get caught up in this like judgment of, oh, I've made these decisions, or I'm, mad at my parents or my society, whatever society that, like you have so much blame. All the people who have screwed me up, right?
Yeah.
But it's not that. It's like honoring that, like that's who I've been up until now, and I have agency.
Yeah. I love. So now I'm really curious. What were those years like when because like that led you into coaching, that led you into your work that you do now, which I know what it's about, which you'll share later on with our audience. But what was that like? Like, what were the feelings at the beginning of that journey?
Yeah. It's a great question. I remember it being very inconsistent. I mean, there were the moments of just feeling completely free. And I should say, so I think I finally resigned probably in September-ish, and then I joined my coach training program around March. So it was about 6 months of just sort of a lot of exploration.
Yeah.
And so there was a feeling of just being free, because I could make my own, I had control over my time. I had a house to myself, which, because this was before COVID and nobody else was working from home. And so that was wonderful. But there were also moments of complete guilt. There were days where I would just start putting resumes together and applying for other product roles. There were days when I would feel desperate for like having to figure something out. And then there was some contract work that I was following, so kind of following my heart and trying some things out. I also remember volunteering a lot at, for the, kids, the school play, like making costumes, so, just kind of using the time for what I wanted. So it was a lot of just exploration.
Mm.
And one thing I didn't mention was that I had actually worked with an executive coach just before I resigned. So like for the last 6 months or something, I think that's actually some of the work that had really helped unlock a lot of this exploration for me. And so that was also really helpful because it was, I had this like feeling in the back of my mind that like maybe I want to look into coaching or understand coaching more and just kind of figure out what that means or what it is. And so I found that somehow coaches kept showing up in my life. Like I talked to somebody and be like, oh wait, you're a coach. I had no idea, another mom or something. And so around that time, I started looking into different coach training programs because I was just curious about them. And ended up signing up for one thinking, it's just like one module. I can see what it's like. And if I like it, great, I'll sign up for the rest. The first day of that coach training program, there was something, it was so crystal clear to me. Like I can't even explain it. It's just like, oh, this is it. Like, this is the answer. This is what I'm going to do. It integrated a lot of things. It integrated the way I was thinking about my family and my life. It integrated some of my spiritual upbringing. It integrated leadership. It integrated like this possibility of staying in tech and continuing to work with the kinds of people I used to work with. So it just like brought things together and answered a question that I had been asking around, like, what's the through line here? Like, how do these all connect? And so that was another really pivotal moment. I just remember that first day just committing and saying, this is what I'm going to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I love it. I love hearing stories like yours where it's like it all comes together. And I love how you said, I can't even explain it. It was just like you just knew, right? Like that intuition, you just knew.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like that moment, right?
Exactly. And it's funny because, you can't really recreate those intuitive moments. And so sometimes I'll look back at that and be like, was I just naive?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, because you're looking at it in hindsight through a thinking lens, but it's not, you're not thinking like actively with your brain in those moments. You're feeling, you're knowing, and you feel that trust of that moment. And sometimes when you look at it in hindsight, you're not feeling it. So you don't, it feels like it was just a naive or kind of random decision, but it wasn't. Like, I know in that moment, the feeling I had was very real.
Yeah.
And that's what I've continued to follow.
Yeah. And that stayed with you.
Yeah.
Stayed with you. How has, I guess, how has your journey been, in defining your own identity? You've, everything's coming together in terms of, that moment that you just shared. How has that impacted you in terms of you as a mom with your kids, in your relationships, even in your own family?
Yeah.
I'm curious about that because I know in my own personal experience, it's like if I were to like look back 6 years ago, I would not have imagined what my relationships and connections would be like in terms of like how I parent. It's so different. I would never imagine so I'm curious to hear your experience.
Yeah, completely. Like I would love to hear more about yours as well, because I think that I feel exactly the same way, which is when I just open my eyes to some of the ways of just, let me just call it leadership coaching for right now, because it's much more than that. It really comes down to just fundamental human philosophy and how people connect. But when I started learning about some of these things, like even just that one framework, if we can start with that I was trained in on the first day, it was just like, oh, this applies to leadership, but it also applies to my relationship with my kids, and it also applies to my relationship with my work, and it applies to how I talk to my parents. And it's just like it applies to everything, because it's just about like how humans connect with one another, and our individual role in every relationship, in the energy we're bringing to every conversation. And so since then, having now, read a lot of parenting books or talked to people who are parenting experts or just kind of talked to other parents, just realizing how much everything, it all applies there as well. And ultimately it's about knowing what you want and being very clear with yourself about what your needs are, knowing how to express them, and knowing how to hold curiosity towards other people's experiences as well. And maybe that's it.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love the last part you said.
Right. Yeah.
Holding the curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when it comes to emotions, I think. Personally, I think being raised by immigrant parents from India, like it's super, super loving, wonderful family that I've always had, and very supportive. But we didn't talk about emotions. We don't really. I mean, I don't even know, like, in my native language, like I'm not even sure how to say half of the emotions, like the words for them, right? Like it's just not something we express much. And to have a language around emotions and how much that actually helps kids as they're growing up is amazing. But also how much it helps leaders to be able to actually express their emotions and also see them in other people, acknowledge them, validate other people's experiences. Like it creates a complete shift in everyone's experience. And so it's all the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you pointed that really directly out right now. It's like, learning how to have that curiosity of emotions in others, right? Also in yourself.
Yeah.
But also knowing how to express them, how to relate to each other with our emotions out of that sense of curiosity.
Yes.
And then you can do, and you just shared, like, you can do it parenting, leadership, relationships, like everything's interrelated.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's interrelated.
Yeah.
This is so awesome. So I want to know, have there been difficult decisions you had made along the way? And how did you make those decisions?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest decisions I made was to follow this career path and let go of another career path that was, that kind of objectively was going to get me a bigger paycheck. At least, I had to start from scratch and move my way up. And so it was restarting. It was in some ways kind of, maybe I don't like to say that I was giving up what I've done before, because I think that all my experiences have led me to where I am right now. I think they contribute to this, but it was in a sense kind of deciding like, okay, that's not what I'm going to continue to pursue. I'm actually going to do this other thing. But I was moved so much by heart that I just wanted to do it. But there was part of my, logical mind that was saying like, what about the background that you have? What about like all of the achievements up until now? Like, you're leaving that all on the table. So it was a hard decision. It was made easy in a number of ways. It was made easy by, like, of course, my husband's support. It was made easy by how much I love doing the work. And I think I'm just, I am the kind of person who would love to follow my heart when I can. And usually my head just bogs me down. And so it felt good in that way, but it was hard. And I think that it's continued to be a hard decision to stay committed to at times.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So there are moments for sure when I can dip into a sense of, is this the best way I can be serving my family? Just when business development is hard, or when I have to try and do something new in order to, get the next client, or when I feel like, oh, maybe it would be better off if I, had a job with health benefits or something like that, And so there are moments where my conviction around sticking with being on my own, it fades, and I have to kind of check in again. And so I'm still open to possibilities of that changing if it needs to, but almost always the way I feel when I do this work prevails. And it says like, no, you're going to continue to do this. And, you know, if business development is hard, you're going to learn what you need to learn to get better at it, because you can stick with this and support your family, and have like something really sustainable. And this can be good for you. And so, you know, it's, I think the way I've really been able to address some of those challenges, or that feeling when the decision feels really hard, is to kind of come back to that place of checking in, recommitting, and then taking small steps, whatever they need to be, to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I love that, because you're talking about giving yourself moments to pause, to check in.
Yeah.
Right. To come back to that pivotal moment of when everything aligned for you, and it was like a moment, right? Like we talked about earlier. It's like coming back and checking in. Does this still ring true for you? You know, checking in with that feeling, and then trusting yourself.
Yeah.
Trusting that feeling, and trusting that, you know, trusting yourself and your own process in this. And I love that, the recommitment, because it's like you give yourself your own boost again of like, but then you also said, you know, I loved also you said, I'm also open to other possibilities, right? It's not like a firm, like, I guess the visual I'm getting, it's not a firm hold on it. It's like almost a loose, like, I'm open here. And it's also like, you're open to whatever comes your way, but as you check in, it helps you get clarity and clear on where do I go from here.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's so right, the way you said that as well, because it's in the moment when I'm checking in, I'm okay with it going in any direction. But I think that it's like, once you commit, right? Like, and so in the moment, I've just come back from like this great training last week and great community and all of that. So I'm feeling, you know, there's a firm hold on this thing. It's like, yes, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And had we had this conversation a month ago, I would have been in that place of like, maybe things will change. Maybe things are going to, you know, maybe things need to change. And so I think, you know, it always ebbs and flows for all of us. And sometimes we resist checking in. We just kind of, it almost feels like we shouldn't be in this place of not feeling committed. You know, sometimes we judge that. But I think it's okay for once in a while for us to kind of question our choices and like look for that place, like look for that moment again, or look for that realignment to make sure that yeah, we are in the right place, or this needs to change for us, this to feel right. I think there's that fluidity that needs to be available at all times as well.
Yeah. How do you navigate to that place where you're okay with fluidity?
Ooh.
Because I know, like, I'm just going to bring in, you know, we've been talking about how like this can relate to any aspect of your life, like even in parenting, having the fluidity. Both have kids around the same age, right? And like, and just like the interesting age right now.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can see how this also relates to parenting. So I'm like, how do you navigate to that place of being okay with fluidity? How have you done that? How do you gotten to that place? Because I can just definitely feel that as you're saying, like you're totally like okay with that, right? Like, you know, and so I'm just curious of like how did you get to that place?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm there always, but but I had this thought when I was coaching a client not long ago, that we're either in one of two states. We're either clear or seeking clarity. And that's it, right? So if we're just in this process of seeking clarity, and if you can see that those moments of stress and there's moments of confusion or, low morale or disengagement or whatever, as just like, okay, it sounds like something's not clear to me. And so let me go find clarity. Like, let me take the steps to get there. And, you're on a journey to get clarity, and you will.
Yeah.
I think that there's just we judge that experience less. And when we're not judging our experiences, when you're not judging, you're curious, right? So you're just kind of curious about, like, where is this going to lead? And I think if there's any quality I could just cultivate more and more and more in myself, it's curiosity. Because any moment when you're not curious, it means that you're holding on to something very tightly and not open to another possibility.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Curiosity allows yourself to be fluid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're open, because it releases all that self-judgment or criticism or shame or blame, Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of really great things you shared in your story today. And I really, really am like, I'm going to be sitting with that. Like, being able to like choose and define your own identity, and just also like the integration of all these things, like in all aspects of your life, right? And then just even this conversation we just had right now of coming back to like curiosity with your emotions, with just your, experiences and, crossroads, right? Because that's when you check in, and allowing yourself opportunity to do that, like as a working mom, because I know that we can just get stuck in this like like tunnel of like go, 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 do, and just having that like pause of checking in, being curious is so powerful in all aspects of our life. All aspects of our life. Is there any lasting words of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh, the bar is really high with that question. I guess where could we go from here? I guess it's really about that. I think it's about I'm so in it with you and with your audience. Like, I'm just another working mom, like trying to figure it out. And I think that maybe just that bit about being curious is what I'm leaning into right now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of committing to trying to keep that as my North Star, my guidepost right now. And so if that's not something that you listening out there have considered, I invite you to do that.
I love it. I love it. As you were saying that, I was like, ooh, curiosity cultivates compassion for oneself and clarity.
Ooh, look at that.
That's like that's like what you've been sharing here. It's like, oh my gosh, I love that. So thank you so much for sharing that, Divya. That's a great way to like just land on curiosity. Who knew how powerful that is?
Thanks for all the amazing questions that have helped cover that.
Yeah. Well, how can people connect with you, if you could share about the work that you do? Because we kind of, tiptoed around it, but like if you could share with our audience like the work that you do, how they can connect with you if they're looking for a leadership coach. Can you share that with our audience? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I am a leadership coach and a facilitator for teams. My goal is to really help leaders do hard things. And so if you're a working mom, there is no question in my mind that you're doing a hard thing probably every hour at least. And so at least I primarily like to connect with people over LinkedIn. So please find me. Divya Ramachandran is my name. And there's not too many of us in the Bay Area, I don't think. And I have a newsletter as well that I love to post on, and it's a space where I use to connect in my own mind, my experiences in work and leadership, family and life, and just really integrate all of that in one space and reflect on it and talk about sort of some takeaways around building clarity and how that helps us do hard things. So an example of hard things to do that I like to help my clients with is having hard conversations. So, I have a guide around that there's a link that you can download that guide to take a look at it. And it just helps you think about, some of the tough conversations you need to have around expressing your needs, setting boundaries, asking for what you want, sharing ideas, all essential at both home, at work and at home. So I'd love to be able to share that with your audience as well. And would love to hear from any of you. Please ping me on LinkedIn, find me, or email me at coach@divyalalita.com. It would be really wonderful to hear from you and know that you heard this episode and took something away from it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yes, I've attended Divya's, she's done a workshop. We were part of a summit, and she is super knowledgeable and helpful. So definitely go and check out her free resource that she just shared about. I'll include all the links in the show notes, everyone. And as we wrap up, we're doing a fun thing here in season 5, which is ending with mom moments in a minute. So you ready, Divya?
Yes, I can't wait.
All right. So first question, here we go. We have 3 questions. To have a moment of peace and quiet to yourself, which place would you choose? Bathroom, car, bedroom, or closet?
I have to say I usually choose bathroom, but maybe car is what I would choose.
Same here. Number 2 is, what's your favorite thing to do with your kids?
I love to read to them or listen to audiobooks with them.
And number 3, to relax, what would you choose? A spa, a hike, nap, read, or craft?
Read.
Ooh, what's your favorite book, or what book are you reading now?
Ooh. I'm reading a couple of different books now. So related to work, I've been actually listening to Connect. This book it comes from a couple of Stanford professors about a course that they've written, which is really awesome, about how people connect with each other. And then I read a lot of just completely that goes through one part of my brain and out the other kinds of books to kill time. So
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your mom moments in a minute, and thanks for being a guest on the show of the Empowered Working Mom Revolution podcast. I really appreciate you sharing your story with me and our audience, and I can't wait for people to connect with you on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really enjoyed our chat.
Alrighty, moms, I hope you enjoyed and feel empowered and seen from today's conversation. Our mission here on the podcast is to amplify the stories of all moms so that you can be seen, heard, and supported in your motherhood journey, regardless of whether you're balancing motherhood with an external career or choosing to dedicate yourself fully to motherhood. And we would appreciate your support because your support matters. And here are 3 ways to support the mission of the podcast. First, you can leave a rating on Apple Podcasts so more moms can discover this podcast. You can select a star rating by scrolling down on the Empowered Working Mom Revolution show page in the Apple Podcasts app. 2, you can write a review on Apple Podcasts so more moms can find a place of solace, comfort, and belonging through this podcast. You can do this by scrolling down on the Empowered Working Mom Revolution show page in the Apple Podcasts app and tap Write a Review. And lastly, make a one-time donation to the podcast for as little as $7 or whatever amount feels best for you. You can click the link in the show notes to make a donation. We appreciate your support, and thanks again for listening in and joining me here on the podcast. I look forward to sharing with you another inspiring mom moment story next week. So until next Wednesday, moms, have a great day.